Welcome in all ways on the journey, where we will look at the future of work, education, society. No one is an expert. Elin and I will share some interesting perspectives, but we really want you all to engage. This is not your average webinar. It is an opportunity to talk, argue, question, and learn with us along the journey. At the end of the session, we do invite you to go into the SurveyMonkey, and feel free to just note it down here and give us some feedback of aspects that you want to work further on or delve further into. That's how we got to today's session, actually, was people wanted to think more about education, the role of it, work, and human skills. And definitely register to carry on along each of the milestones on the journey. We do live in very interesting times, which we're truly in a perfect storm, as we see on the east coast of the US with the advancing hurricanes, as we see with geopolitics and advancing war around the world, economic uncertainty that ties to the geopolitics, and the speed at which technology is growing. I really do feel as though we as leaders in our own right and capacity have a great opportunity to take advantage of technology, learn from each other, collaborate, so that we can actually turn the negatives to the positives. And time is ticking. In a recent conference that I was in with some of the leaders from Google, Meta, and a number of the research institutions, we talked about how fast AI in particular is evolving. And the latest predictions are that by the beginning of 2025, all of the knowledge in the world, all of the research, the encyclopedias, the books, the journals from around the world will be assimilated into some forms of large language models, research, and AI. Everything that is published in the world, which says for us that we no longer have to go searching for knowledge. Knowledge will be available to us at the touch of a button. Any question, any need, any research that you're looking for, available within seconds. So it's truly commoditizing, if you will, knowledge. People that for years have charged big money for an hour of their time because they're an expert may have to rethink their business model, because knowledge will be available to us all. That has big impact for people as well as for jobs, because the previous concept of a knowledge worker, somebody that knows something that people go to for information, those people could be displaced if their total value was perceived as providing knowledge. So the basic task, the basic how can I, where can I, what is the status, the basic processing of information may no longer have any value within a year. So what does that mean for society? I personally believe it's good news, because it means that we as people no longer have to be the conduit of knowledge. We can think bigger. We can think about how we as individuals and as companies and as collaboration partners, how can we use the knowledge that's available to us in order to solve problems, in order to explore, in order to innovate, in order to get past these issues that seem to be affecting society as we continue in kind of an industrial age mode. Let's think beyond knowledge and hours worked to think about what's really possible, to take on that open-mindedness that we as children had and the children in our lives have, asking what's possible. I can do anything. I have access to the knowledge. I have access to the resources. What can I create? It opens us up to that mindset of the world is my oyster. How can I impact it? And how can I drive real change? And if you look at and think about humans, I mean, we have brains. And a lot of studies have shown that much of our brain, much of the size of our brain, is designed to allow us to be creative, to think differently, to ask these big what's possible questions that young people ask. And within those brains, there's other areas and other sections that can be used for various tasks. There's one small section, which is the section that is designed in order to do routine tasks. From a size of our brain point of view, that's 10 to 20%. But when we look at jobs today, many jobs at least, 80% of the job is doing routine tasks, following steps, going through the priorities, making sure everything is done, creating, writing, putting it all in order, organizing, tracking, administering. That's using that small amount of brain most of the time. There's another small amount of brain which defines the priorities and defines the structures. Between those two segments, that's 85% of the average worker's day, doing the repeat things for 8 hours a day, which is what's been valued. And that leaves a lot of capacity in the other side of the brain, which is really defined to be innovation, creation, asking that what's possible question. So if we can, as a society, leverage that young mindset of what's possible by freeing these back end parts of the brain so that we can use more of the forward thinking, then we can solve some of these big problems in the world. Which leads me to one of the questions that I have when I look at what we're doing today, because today we are taking those young people and we're putting them in rooms. As soon as a child gets to 5 or 6 years of age, they're no longer at home in the rocket ship. They're no longer able to think those big things because they have to go to classes. And we continue putting them through classes until they're 20, 22, 25 years of age. And in many cases, those classes look a lot like this. They sit in little boxes with somebody that yaps at them. That yapping or teaching often comes from books. That's knowledge. That's not really allowing or giving them the capacity or the room or the tools or the experience to explore that what's possible. So that's where I personally question in today's world, the type of education that is being provided and believe that a true education institution that has a responsibility of preparing people for work in society, and ideally for work in society in the future, those institutions need to think differently and explore how can young people, whether it's 5 years old or 20 years old, how can people really gain experience, gain confidence, gain knowledge, and ability to use that knowledge to solve problems by thinking differently. Because if we think about ourselves, we learn by doing. At least most of us do. Years ago, as we were working with a number of millennials coming into the workforce 15 years ago, I will never forget one group saying, I've been sent to training by this company, but that's not how I learn. I learn by rolling around in it, trying it, failing, experimenting, and exploring. Which is just like if we look at young people, kids, you don't buy your child a bike and then buy him a book for him to sit and read the book. At least most people don't. Most people buy him a bike and go out with it, because that's how you learn how to ride the bike, not from the book. So I personally question the education systems that follow the steps, put people into boxes, either give them books or read books to them and expect them to memorize knowledge. Let's help them to explore how to use knowledge available to everybody in order to really drive change and do things differently. And it was very good in working with and talking to some of my colleagues at Adobe a couple of weeks ago. Adobe has a large operation and a large focus on education to prepare people for the future. And Goldsmiths, University of London, is known for being a very creative, open-minded university that is bringing the tools that are available, ranging from AI tools, ranging from video, ranging from Gen AI and using graphics, in order to really free people to think differently. Much of the learning in Goldsmith is experimental. It's asking young people to go out, think about things, question things, work in society using the tools, but working together as people, as opposed to sitting in rooms, having somebody basically read a book. So the role of education, I believe, should be one that teaches children how to use technology, how to leverage technology, and how to get access to the knowledge, and then apply it outside of the classroom, apply it in the real world, because that's where the challenges and the opportunities lie. So to rethink education as a path to problem solving, to rethink work as a way of delivering value to society and creating and generating, as opposed to a set of tasks based on knowledge. So what does all of this mean for the skills that young people need in the future? From all of the studies that I've seen and my understanding of where the future is going in perspective, the biggest skills people are going to need are human skills. Because as we use more and more technology to get access to that knowledge in our work, the more we appreciate and value the human skills. Things that were in the past called soft skills, understanding, empathy, listening to people, collaborating, asking those what ifs with one another. That's where the ideas come. That's where the solutions come. And true customer experience. Yes, 30%, possibly more of those customer service jobs of somebody simply answering questions, those will go away. But that frees people to provide a true customer experience, going deep and understanding the customers, what they want, what they need, having empathy, understanding where they're coming from, making the judgment calls and guiding people through this journey, as well as the critical business skills. More and more as we use technology and especially AI, critical thinking is becoming the number one skill that we all should be using every day. I hear people say, oh, I used to go to work for 8 hours and have these tasks. Now I can do those same tasks in an hour, and I have 7 hours I can just go hang out. I would question that in a whole set of ways. One is to be able to effectively use Gen AI or any other tool, you need some time to think critically. What is it I'm looking for? How might I ask this? When you get a response back, look at it equally critically. Take that step back and think about what would this feel like, sound like, be like from a different perspective, such as my clients. And then apply it such that in those 8 hours, you might spend 1 hour doing tasks that you used to do, but you spend 7 hours doing much more, using that prefrontal vortex of your brain to create something, to create greater value, to have greater impact on society. So we need to really educate through experience, in my belief, young people and ourselves how to think critically, how to look carefully at the problem, the various solutions, and then make the right choices. And yes, we need technical skills, but in a lot of the studies I see, 25 to 40% at most of the people in society in another 10 years should have strong technical capabilities. The rest of us need the capabilities to be able to utilize the technology in the way to solve the problems, because we do have enough problems in the world today that we need that. What's possible? Let's be innovative. Let's roll around in it and work towards a better future. So those are a few of my perspectives, and we're not quite sitting in chairs around the table in the same room, but from past experience, we have had some very nice dialogues after segments of content, if you will, such as what I've just shared. And I say we've got lots of interesting points of view here in the chat. But I want to open up for general questions. We'll take about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll turn over to Ellen. Matthew, I see your hand up first.
Yeah, it's probably more of a comment. It relates to something we talked about the last time, which is the raise of the importance of trades, carpenters, plumbers,
Mhm.
and also from the point of view of education. They don't teach creativity, they don't teach innovation, and they don't teach business that much, from what I've seen
Yet.
anyway. So they basically educate people to not be ready for the real world. And I've seen a little shift change in a maritime university in Cork, local to me. But other than that, you're right. They're not teaching life skills.
Mhm.
And the best people that I've ever had as part of my team have been the least educated, but the most brain turned on.
Yep.
That includes me, by the way.
I completely agree. And from a Silicon Valley perspective, we value experience and we value innovation and creativity a lot more than the degrees on the paper. And I definitely would suggest for all of us as we advise young people in our lives, look for the universities, look for the areas where you can really go and get that experiential creative learning. Goldsmiths is simply one. There's many out there.
Actually, one other thing. IBM are working on Gen 2 at the moment
Hmm.
because the quantum computer thing came up before, and it seems a little bit kind of, is it actually possible kind of thing? But I think you're right in what we talked about the last time as well, is that when quantum gets together with AI, I mean, God only knows what it'll come up with. And I don't think anybody really knows what that combination will look like and what stratosphere we'll be jumping into when it does.
Yes, I completely agree. And just a comment to you, Charlie, from what you put in the chat. I agree that what we're seeing today with AI does not go into the EQ, the emotional quotient elements. It's all about knowledge, but that's one of the missing links and the areas that humanity brings to the table is the emotion and the context. Other questions, comments?
Hey Jennifer, it's Carver. Quick comment.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, really enjoyed the discussion, and I appreciate especially that you talked about critical thinking and problem solving, because I think that that's one of the biggest missing elements in all of our societies right now. People believe information. If it's on their phone, it must be true.
It's not.
If a professor says it, it must be gospel. They don't question hardly anything, and there's also a group think that has evolved because of social media and the pressure that applies, and I think AI amps all that up, right? And so I think I just wanted to hone in on that piece. I think that's going to be one of the biggest differentiators in the workforce is people who can question things
Yes.
and don't just take one bit of information as the whole story.
Completely agree. And the people that I hear say, "Oh, well, I don't have to think about it anymore." That makes me go crazy. It's like, no, you have to think about it a lot more. You need to take that step back and take the time and process it and look at it from different angles.
I
Absolutely.
also think the point you hit on with emotional intelligence is huge. And even if you think about the output from AI models, if you don't put that human touch on it, you can kind of tell that it was AI generated now. Like I think we're all becoming savvy enough, right? You can tell AI wrote this, for example, right? And so turning it around, I think it's an opportunity for people who can take maybe that raw information and then make it so it comes out in their authentic voice. It helps them really stand out. So when I think about future leaders, I think the people that can use these tools but not use them as a crutch will really see a benefit.
Completely agree. Use them as an assistant, if you will. So with that, Evelyn, are you ready to dive in and share a little bit of perspectives of where this is all going?
Absolutely. Okay, so let me just first share my screen. So let me first start by setting the stage my way. So I travel a lot, like Jennifer. I speak with a lot of leaders, in particular across Europe, across all types of industries, really all types of industries, from bakers to gold traders and everything in between. And a fundamental issue when it comes to discussions around AI is to understand that AI, as we know it today, is not magic. It is mathematics. Now you can say, oh, but that's obvious. Well, from a lot of discussions we have everywhere, from LinkedIn to media to the boardroom to the lunch cafeteria. Apologies. There is this challenge that people don't really understand how AI works. And whenever we humans encounter something we don't really understand, we resolve to thinking that it's some kind of divine force or magic. But as long as we resolve to thinking that it's slightly magical, we will not be able to have any useful discussions, neither around opportunities nor around the challenges or the need for guardrails, for example, or for regulation. So we really do need to remind ourselves that this is about mathematics, even when it comes to the latest strawberry model. Never mind how tempting it feels to call it magic, it is not, it's mathematics. And from that point, I just want to use the good old example of the calculator. I know is worn out, but I would just want to bring in another perspective of it. So when I went to school, say primary school, end of primary school, we were used to, or we were allowed to use kind of very simple version of a calculator, like the one to the left. When I started university, we were allowed to use the Texas Instrument graphical calculators, very, very advanced, right? But even during high school, those were considered cheating because they were taking over the role of really learning how to do things. And even in mathematics, even if we have very advanced calculators, we still need to learn to do arithmetic. Before this session, I had a phone call from my stepson. He said, "Can you help me with my math homework? I don't understand." So I had to explain on phone. But the point is that we really need to understand and learn the basics of anything. And then we can use the tools for something bigger, more advanced, whatever. And we need to think of the large language models as kind of advanced Texas Instrument calculators for languages, because that's what they are. It's not magic. And when we are able to understand that it is an advanced calculator for text, that's when we can really approach it as a tool. And I would call the toolbox, really, the AI toolbox, where generative AI is only one compartment, where ChatGPT is kind of the pocket in one corner of that compartment of the toolbox. So if we think about education, why would we want kids to learn to use AI tools? Now, I'm talking about anything from kids in primary school to university level, really. Well, first of all, is to prepare those kids, those students, for life in society, because these AI tools, whether you like them or not, they're going to be around. So unless we actually teach the kids from a very early stage how to use these tools, they will either think that they are magic, or they will abuse them and use them in the wrong way, or not be able to use them in a beneficial way. And then they need to learn how to use them to be able to learn how and when to question technology. Because without that hands-on experience in using these tools, they will not know when the tool is wrong. Just like when you have a new drill in your very physical toolbox at home, and it's really fancy, maybe it even has some kind of diamond powder on it, whatever, it's shiny, gold paint perhaps, and then you really want to use it, and then every problem becomes the need for a hole in the wall, right? And then you don't have this critical mindset to really think about, what do I need if I want to build a house? Well, I might need some holes, but I do need a whole lot of other things as well. And when it comes to this AI toolbox, we really need to learn how and when to question it, because there are so many opportunities for taking the wrong turn. And I saw one of the questions was around guardrails, and that there's still a lot to do around guardrails and regulation. Yes, I agree on that. However, if we approach this toolbox with a mindset where we expect the tool to be completely foolproof, we will never get there. It's just like if I handed out a knife to my 13-year-old stepson and his mother claimed that I was a really bad stepmom, as he would be able to cut himself on that knife. Well, Yes, he can cut himself, but he's 13, so he also needs to learn how to use that knife without cutting himself and actually use it to cook food. And that's how we need to approach this toolbox as well. If we want to approach it in a way where we expect all potential for messing things up to be covered, well, we're never going to get there. And then, of course, it's about using this toolbox to enhance learning. We call it personalized learning, or we'll think of it whichever way you want. But there are a lot of kids who don't learn by either, as Jennifer said, listening to somebody yapping or by reading a book. Like, again, my stepson, he's slightly dyslexic, and he probably learns better by listening, perhaps, or being able to test things while he's reading, or getting some kind of summary support during short intervals while reading. And the AI tools will provide a whole lot of different variations over tools to support each individual kid or student with their learning in very, very many different ways. There are some big holes and questions here, of course, and we will have to solve those or just understand how they work, so to avoid them. But really, we have a great opportunity here to help kids learn more faster. And then, as Jennifer also pointed out, it's about access to knowledge in a much bigger scale than we have ever had, because now everything is available. But maybe not quite everything. There are a couple of big challenges that I want to point your attention to. And one is, who decides which sources to learn from? Now, Jennifer said, anything written will be available. Yes, if it is written and converted to digital format. That is true of the Western part of the world, and in particular to English-speaking countries, but also for the Norwegian society. Anything is digitalized here. However, if you look to the African continent, for example, very little in comparison has been digitalized, which means that there is a lot of knowledge that only exists verbally or handwritten somewhere. So we have a very significant bias here between different parts of the world. So we need to keep that in mind. The other question is, okay, so say we have available all digital content out there. Who decides which content out there should be available to our kids? Because we know that not all content out there is true, worth reading. And a lot of it is not according to the values of our society. And then you can say, well, is that really true of a liberal democratic society? Well, let me just give you one example. I am pretty sure that whatever is acceptable in a Norwegian school might not be acceptable in a school in a conservative part of the US. And I'm not judging whichever is right or wrong, or better or worse. I'm just saying it is by definition different. Or you can look to China versus perhaps Europe, but let's do Middle East, for example. Again, huge cultural and political differences. Who decides? And if then we dig into that rabbit hole, we come to realize that the overarching human rights, they do not take into account religion, culture, etc., which means that if we're going to start putting guardrails around what we believe is right for our society, we're up for trouble. It's not possible, right? With respect for all different cultures and religions out there, or political views, we can't define something as right and something else as wrong. And this is going to cause a lot of political discussions in academia and around schools and education. And then, of course, it's a question of cheating, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to point out a very significant part, and that is that good old plagiarism tools. That's pretty straightforward. It's about checking whether something written in a deliverable by a student has been written before, and whether it is correctly referenced. That's a plagiarism detector. Now, in a lot of academic institutions, they approach detection of AI-generated text in the same way. And that is a huge mistake because it doesn't work that way. So generative AI detectors, they really only compare a text to a text that a machine could have written. Which means that if a student has no spelling mistakes, complex language, very consistent rhythm of the language, for example, the text can easily be predicted as written by a machine, even if it is not. And we've already seen cases internationally where students have been falsely accused of cheating. I have been falsely accused of cheating. I can tell you that story later if it's relevant. But this is a huge challenge. And it's not easily solved. So how to solve it? Well, maybe we should stop trying to solve it because it's impossible to solve. Then on to a slightly different topic. Jennifer mentioned loss of jobs. So I want to take that a little bit further. Now, Jensen Huang was in media a while back, so this clip is from March this year. And he said that AI will take over coding, making learning optional. I'll repeat, making learning optional. And I really thought about this for a while, and I came to realize that learning cannot be optional. Actually, it's the other way around. We humans need to learn more, faster, throughout our entire careers. Because if we do what Jensen Huang is trying to tell us, that learning is optional, we can just lean back and let the AI tools do the job, we will become slaves of technology, which means that we have lost the game. Now, if we humans want to stay in the game, we need to learn more faster to be able to master the technology, which means that we need to learn more about more stuff throughout our entire careers. Micro-learning is not the answer to that. We actually do need to learn more, deeper, about many things throughout our careers. So the topic of polymathy will become much more important as we move forward. So what do we need to learn then? Well, there are many interesting discussions around this on LinkedIn because I see a lot of people claiming, oh, here's the AI program that your entire company needs. And I don't believe in that approach, right? Because it depends. Do you have some kind of vocational training? You work as a plumber? Well, maybe you only need to learn how to use the tools. Are you going to design an AI application? Okay, then you need to learn more on a very technical level. Are you a leader and you're going to lead an organization based on using AI for automated decision-making, for example, or optimizing processes using prediction models? Well, in that case, you need a whole different set of skills around leadership and decision-making. And those are about mathematics and statistics. It's not about generative AI tools. So to just come to my conclusion for this short introduction, we, the humans, need to learn more, faster, for longer, actually throughout our entire careers. What I'm really saying is that the good old traditional educational system is Stone Age. We need to redo this. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Lots of great content there. Philip, you have your hand up first.
Hi, thanks, Jennifer. Apologies, I joined late. I actually, never mind AI, Zoom wasn't letting me in for about 10 minutes. So, anyway, I guess I can go public. In about 6 months' time, I'll be the owner of a university.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, this is a very passionate issue for me. I'll just offer, obviously I could talk forever, but I'll just offer the following thoughts. One is that just as we're very used now to assessing people on open book, then my view is that we should equally assess people open book, open AI, because just as computers, before those calculators, are ubiquitous, our ability to function in life, in the workplace, is a function of how we make use of these tools. So those are the skills which we need to be giving, and we mustn't be dogging the manger about this. We have to embrace these technologies and recognize that everybody's using these technologies. And I think that education is becoming incredibly exciting because we should be surfing the wave of everything, be it AI, VR, 3D, the lot.
Mm-hmm.
The second thought which I have when it comes to cheating and assessment, what we really should be thinking about is what has the student gained? How can the student apply what they've learned in life? So I'm a great believer in student reflection diaries, in personalized reaction to what they've learned, and equally, I haven't fully thought this through, but the concept of flipped learning, where the students teach themselves, so flipped assessment even, where they practically self-assess. And I'm working with the world's largest EdTech accelerator here in Malta. And I'm seeing some very, very interesting and extremely exciting things in the current cohort of 14 companies which we have here, which are making me think afresh about education and about how we do all these things. And at the moment, I'm just processing what I've seen because the cohort only started a week ago. And the final thing, well, two things. One is, and this is a point I make all the time, that we as humans can never compete with these things in terms of knowledge. And AI beats us hollow. So we should not be teaching rote learning. We should not be necessarily teaching memory. What we should be teaching is how to use this stuff and how to be discriminating in how we use it. And the second thing is we've got to recognize that attention spans are collapsing. You know, some people say 2 minutes, some people say 9 minutes, whatever the number is, but it's collapsing. And what AI and technology, I believe, enables us to do is to follow that collapse of attention spans down into delivering not just small digestible chunks of learning of 15 minutes, but into micro, and now I'm thinking in terms of nano credits.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if TikTok can deliver a 2-minute soap opera, then why can't we teach differential calculus in 2 minutes? I mean, going back to your first slide, Elin. Mm-hmm. I mean, differential calculus can be very easily taught in 2 minutes. Nobody ever tries to do it, but it can be. So those are my initial reactions and thoughts.
Thank you. Let's balance the tools, the technology tools and the brain tools. Let's go to Aniko. I saw her hand come up here, or it went down. Let's see.
Oh, well, I mean, I was just going to propose really quickly with regards to students and cheating and AI. You can just ask them to present their findings very similarly to theses, which happens very common in Europe. Students have to justify their work. So they turn it in, but then they have to defend it in front of a panel. So that's a really quick and easy way to figure out if the person actually has in-depth knowledge or if they quickly put it together. And also typically a person that writes with a high vocabulary, they typically also speak with a high vocabulary. So you will see similarities and be able to figure out.
Excellent. Matthew.
Yeah, similar, I think, but I'm not sure. I'm just thinking of the global problem in education, which is shortage of teachers. We're about 10% short here in Ireland. And the education system, I don't know what you think, Philip, but it hasn't changed in a long, long time. I was working with a few companies in Singapore and Belgrade who have education platforms, and they what we should be doing is using AI or figuring out how to use AI to help people to get through school quicker. So we need less teachers and we eliminate that 10% problem instead of saying, no, 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 you can't use AI. I mean, that's bullshit. Why would you not use something that could help somebody, especially if they're dyslexic or they have reading problems or something like that? There's loads of different applications.
Yeah,
I saw one nod anyway, so
it's that question that I always ask when people say, but AI is going to take my job. Well, there's at least 500 other jobs that you could move into, and there's already a shortage of people in the job you're in. So it doesn't make sense. It's think differently. Just like, and I'll just point those that have not looked at the chat, we have a little bit of a dialogue going about global availability of technology and global availability of learning, which I do believe is a much broader question than we will cover today, but is something that we need to be cognizant of. Phil, if you had a point back to Matthew, maybe.
Yes, indeed. There are 2 points which I'd make. Firstly, I agree that the teaching profession is very hidebound. Unfortunately, or fortunately, how do we decide which university or school do we go to? We go on reputation. Where does reputation come from? It comes from the past. Of the 10 or the 100 top universities in the world, only 2 of them are less than 100 years old. So when you have a whole profession, a whole market, which is determined by backwards reference, then that is hardly an environment for encouraging innovation in teaching. The second point is picking up on your point about availability of teachers. Look, those of us in the West, generally speaking, and China for that matter, we have the luxury of deciding whether we use AI or not in teaching. If you're in Africa, then if all the students who are actually qualified and want to study at bachelor's level did so, they would need 5 times more PhDs than there are available. So in Africa, there's no choice. We either upgrade Africa in terms of education by using AI, or it doesn't happen. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, very good point. And if knowledge is equally available to us all, I would argue that our human brain and our desire to learn, that is equal for us all, whatever our socioeconomic area. It's just as a society, we need to encourage people to think differently, to ask those questions, to really learn by doing and exploring as we're doing here today. Matthew, a point.
yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Africa, Philip. There's a company in South Africa and they're developing AI coaches. So I'm a coach and mentor myself. And I've got a software background as well, so I don't really get freaked out as much as other coaches by AI. They can't do that, can't do that. And the argument similar to what you brought up, Philip, they can't afford coaches in, I think they brought up Mozambique as an example. And if they have this availability of AI coaches and companies that can sponsor, a lot of people that can't afford therapy or can't afford coaches and stuff like that can get access. So you can provide a valuable resource through AI because you're never going to be able to do it with human beings. They're just too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. And we can certainly continue the dialogue a bit. Shaheen, why don't you jump in, and I'm going to bring up a few actions we can all take as you jump in.
So just as I'm listening to the excellent conversation, the question in my mind is, what is the purpose of education? And and that becomes immediately relevant to what is the future of jobs, because jobs are now necessary for livelihood. And is that still going to be the case? In what fashion? But in general, I sort of also think there's a difference between elementary school education and early childhood education and university education. And while I think all of them are kind of ripe for renovation, the university one especially is ready, because it really is 400 or 500 years old in terms of just the way it's set up, and you know, the campus structure, et cetera, et cetera. And and what, and I'm not, you know, in fact, you know, when I talk to universities, I always ask, what does the university of 21st, 22nd century look like? Are you building towards that? And as an academic institution, you would expect that that would be a great area of research and development. And I don't know if it is or not. I'm not seeing it anyway. It's not visible to me how the university construct is shifting to match the requirements of the new age. I think when you go to elementary school, the dynamics really changes in a significant way, and sort of more of the social structure comes in. I think poverty is a really big problem in education in general. So I'll pause there for some thoughts that come to my mind as I listen.
And I'll just interject the slide that I have put up here are the things that Elin and I have thought through to leave you as takeaways. And again, we'll be on here for a bit, but just to begin to think about going forward after today, when you get something that is either openly generated by AI or has been provided to you, do that critical thinking. Don't just take it and run with it. Think about, where did this really come from? Why is this true? And then think about, how would others react to this? A big challenge with AI and social media is people just take it and they assume this is what the world believes. Think about it from others' lenses, others that come at it from a different culture. And think about how we learn. Let's begin to set the examples with people in our lives, our coworkers, our family members, to continue to learn by doing, which leads to exploring. There is no book, there is no right way to learn AI. Use AI and use different kinds of AI tools. I'm kind of attached to ChatGPT, but I also like to look at, what does Perplexity say? What does Claude say on a given topic? Personally, I find it fascinating to look at the different lenses and the different angles. That helps you to learn how these tools work, but it also helps you to look at things from a multi-divisional viewpoint. So we each, as leaders in our companies and our societies, have a role in creating that future by demonstrating how learning is really, really done. So I put this up here, and I'll leave it up here for a couple of minutes of the survey that we would like your feedback on other topics, and do be sure to check out past sessions. We'll have the recording from this session up on the website later this week, and we'll definitely continue the journey with Carver as our featured thought leader in November, and move forward from there. So other questions?
Jennifer, I would like to throw in a couple of perspectives.
Yes, please.
Kind of replying to some of the comments, but also a few alternative thoughts. So I often get this question about job loss. How many jobs will be lost? Well, who knows? And then there are a lot of jobs where we do not have enough people, like teachers and healthcare workers and cybersecurity specialists, for example. But I often use the analogy of role. So my point is that I think it's more about role definition. So I use the analogy of my accountant. So I'm not very happy about doing accounting. I find it really, really boring, but it has to be done. I have an accountant and she's really, really good. I do not pay her for her world championship skills in doing accounting. I pay her for being my specialized advisor on my finances. So it's about what is her role definition,
Yes.
right? So being an accountant is not about being world champion in doing invoicing. When I started my working career many, many years ago, I started working in a supermarket. And at that time, I actually there was like these yellow stickers on the products, and I had to actually type in the number. Every Tuesday, there was a paper commercial with the discounted prices on certain products for that week. And when I got to work on Friday, I had to learn that list of discounted products by heart. Otherwise, I was going to make mistakes, right? But a few years later, we got these bleeper scanners. It's not like all those people working in the supermarket disappeared because their job was made a bit easier. And even today, when you can do the self-scanning, there are still people working in the supermarket. They just do different things. Now they're more security surveillance, but still there's people in the supermarket, right? So I think we need to discuss not just job loss, but role definitions. Which problems are we actually solving more than which tasks will be replaced? So that's one perspective. And I hear this question of creativity and the need to teach creativity. And maybe so. I'm an engineer, so I would turn it around a little bit. And I would say that real creativity in problem solving depends on knowledge. You actually need to know quite a bit about the problem to be solved, to be able to be creative about potential solutions. And let me add, you probably also need to have quite a bit of knowledge about surrounding topics. Creativity in problem solving is not being able to paint nice pictures or being able to ask ChatGPT about some wild guess about how things could be solved. It's by really understanding what is the problem and what could be potential solutions. That requires knowledge. A lot of that knowledge, you cannot just rely on some AI tool or search engine to find it when you need it. And I hear that trainer reasoning and a lot of teaching. Oh, but they don't need to learn because they can look it up when they need it. That doesn't work because a lot of skills you actually need to have integrated. Right? Imagine a doctor who would have to look up anatomy every time you come in with a muscle injury, right? You would expect a doctor to know their anatomy like this by heart. And there's so many examples of just that we still need those skills. We need to learn by heart. We need to have deep knowledge about a lot of things. We can't rely on AI to tell us whatever we need when we need it. It's too late. Then that means that critical thinking relies on knowledge. So what I hear kind of the tendencies of in social media now is that critical thinking is kind of like supporting conspiracy thinking, right? Because critical thinking, oh, that's about thinking about whether the deep state or are they coming up with some like whatever nonsense, right? So we need to be very clear that to be able to do critical thinking, you actually need to know quite a bit about the topic that you're being critical about. And you need to seek out real knowledge, right? Critical thinking is not the same as thinking, oh, maybe some president is preparing some whatever project. And then to Jennifer's final point about how much time do you spend every day on learning? As Jennifer said in the beginning, I have started studying law, right? So I'm 47. I work more than full time. I have several board positions. I work as a speaker, just like Jennifer. I travel a lot. And I started studying law. And people ask me, so why? Well, there are many reasons why. But how do I do it? By being a student on Saturdays and Sundays. That's the only doable way, right? Which means that, of course, it comes with a cost. In Norway, a lot of people would want to work less, have more spare time. What do they do in their spare time? It's not learning, right? It's like watching Netflix or TikTok or uh, sitting on the couch, right? So really, when we talk about taking more time to learn, is really about a disciplined approach to prioritization. You need to prioritize learning. And we are probably going to see a new differentiation in society where you have one part of society where people actually take the time to learn, they prioritize learning throughout their entire career. And then you will have a part of society where people don't really care about that and they prioritize binging Netflix and just chilling out and not doing much. Unfortunately, right? Which means that we're going to have one part of society who do not understand what's happening when it comes to technology and the development within many disciplines. And then you will have the other part of society that will actually be the masters of technology. That is problematic from a democratic point of view. That was my rant for today.
I would just add to that, which I fully agree with all points, that in our chat discussion, there was a question of the gap between those that have access to technology and those that don't, which I do agree is currently a problem. But I think the reality, as Elin said, even those that have access to technology and ways to learn can fall on the side of the fence of stuck in the old way. Those that really want to use that brain and really want to do something and have the impetus and see the value in learning, growing, and scrapping through, as we say in Silicon Valley, that they are the ones that I think can be part of our community as we drive forward into the future. But it's up to each of us to make that decision. Do I want to learn, challenge, think differently, grow in new ways, or am I comfortable on the couch with the Netflix? Carver.
Just dovetailing on some of what Ellen was saying too, and back to the critical thinking topic, I think, because it just keeps coming around for me. I was reminded when back in 2010, after working in IT for several decades, I went back to get an MBA in sustainable business with a focus in alternative energy because I was thinking perhaps I would bridge over to green tech, just from pure tech. And the experience I had after having already been a professional in the workplace for 25, 30 years and having all these accomplishments in my career and then being put into an educational environment where on day one they say, well, everything you think you know doesn't matter. For every course that you work through, you have to cite sources for any opinion you have. And here are what acceptable sources are. And that was probably one of the most valuable parts of the whole MBA process, was challenging myself to ask, why do I think this? Right? Like I know this to be true, but then when I would go look for sources of information, sometimes I would slightly modify that opinion. And it really made me question a lot about where things came from. And I think it's very relevant to the AI world where so much can be generated now, but you have to have human oversight, number one, but you need to either have contextual knowledge to be able to spot check, what's getting produced to see is this accurate or not. There's plenty of stories of AIs that have produced things that are not. But I think it's also an imperative for everyone to check your sources, right? So it's just, this was all resurfacing for me and remembering what a pain that was for me going through the courses for things I thought I knew to be true, but having to go and find reliable sources and look for multiple sources. It's actually a really valuable exercise. And I would say it's probably a good way to start to ingrain some of that discernment and critical thinking in workers, right? When people come up with information, check your source.
Very, very good point. Matthew.
I feel like I'm just doing this all the time, but anyway.
It's all good. It's a dialogue. We're exploring, and I will send the link for the survey out because I'm unable to get it correctly in the chat, it seems. But go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest, Jack, because you can't click on the link.
Yeah.
But back to what Ellen was saying about the engineer brain. You know, if you ask an engineer what time it is, they'll tell you where the watch was made, what it's made out of, how many parts it has, and then eventually you might actually get to the time. That's the engineer's joke. I'm just wondering if AI could be utilized in a smart way to help people to educate or to do the right education. Because I'm just thinking to myself, so many people go through college and do something that they think they should do. I think that's ironic coming from me because my dad was a welder and I became a fitter, but I was running an engineering company for 18 years as well as a software company. But as a way to help predict whether somebody should be an engineer or a doctor or a nurse or a care worker. You know, so like a lot of people go through, I'm not going to get cordy now or gordy or whatever, but a lot of people go through depression because they're actually in the wrong job.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are unproductive because they're in the wrong job. And a lot of people are unproductive because they're pissed off that they're in the wrong job.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only educated to be in that job. So early prediction of what would you more likely to be happy at doing, not better at doing, but happy.
Mm-hmm. What I call motivated skills, the things that you feel align with your purpose here on this planet, that you get motivated to achieve and have some ability to do. Mm-hmm. Elin.
That might be relevant for vocational training. For a lot of academic education, people just study something and they end up doing a whole lot of different things. Like I was just thinking when you said that, I was thinking, yeah, maybe that makes sense. And then I was thinking, so what was I educated to do and what did I end up doing? Right? And I think that a lot of people around me have the same reflection that they studied something and they ended up doing something they would never, ever have imagined that they would be doing. So I think in the future, we are probably going to see more of that because we have more crossovers compared to like the conventional thinking of discipline. And we will need people with skills in more than one discipline. So what I'm saying is that people need to learn more than one discipline, right? And even if it's vocational training, you will need to learn more than one discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you would need to learn an academic discipline in addition to your vocational training, and you still do the job that you are trained for through your vocational training, but it's your academic addition or add-on that kind of decides like your subdirection. So I think moving forward, we will have to redefine how we understand disciplines.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And some of this, I think, sets us up nicely for November's walk with Carver on the future of work and roles and what are jobs and value. Because when I look at the challenges in the world that are massive, and I look at the way we educate and the way we structure jobs, I mean, there's all of these multi-dimensional, complex, holistic challenges. And then we structure education and jobs. You need a fitter, you need a piper, you need a roofer, you need a this. Well, no, my objective is I want a house built and I want to go to somebody that understands and has the ability either to do a little bit of all of that or bring others in. So, I mean, I would suggest in the future, we really need to rethink how we look at the challenges in the world and the needs in society. And maybe it's not having an accountant or a roofer. It's having a person that is good at solving this problem. And they've had education where they've had experience working in and practicing solving problems like this with technology that may not fit into a particular specialty or a silo. Carol.
Yeah, between what Ellen and Matthew were saying, it brings to mind how about a combination of what is it that the vocational, and if we're going to call vocational, like a doctor could be vocational in my mind, not just but what is it like your mindset, Ellen? How do we figure out what that mindset is as a kindergartner, as fifth grade, as you're going through? Because then that says go in that direction instead of mold yourself into, oh, my father was a welder, I'll become a fitter, using that comparison. So I think like putting that all together, how are all of we made, and what are the potentials? And then given the opportunity to try that on, instead of saying you're going to be a technician in X-ray technician, but what would you like? But having that information, like who are we? I'm like, what would I have done? I know what my daughter did because she found out in her first year of college what she wanted to do. And I had suggested one of the brilliant things of raising my whole daughter, I says, take one of those career classes. She found out that she wanted to become what in America would call a graduate gemologist, working with diamonds, gems, jewels, and all of that. So when she was ready to go take that specialized training, she had grown up, she's ready. I was like, okay, Mom, I'm ready to go. And she loves what she does. But if she hadn't taken that, I don't think she would have found that in our typical school. So I think it's great. And Ellen, not just you, but the others may be going, well, I kind of interested in this. I'm kind of interested in this. I just want to do this. And I'm not sure. It's like, great. Let that be a strength to say you're in the right place for where your potential and the kind of thinking. I don't know, but I love figuring things out, but I would never want to weld, and I would never want to get my hands dirty, and I would never want to get grease. Like my husband asked me to help him on an old car, and I'm like, okay, I'll hold that. But I can think about how it works. So that's just kind of like my mindset. What might have I been encouraged to do? Meaning, well, and I'm saying, who's here? Like, I feel like I'm among masters here. My background is probably very different than most everybody here. I'm just imagining. I don't